Gold plays an integral role in our life, not only economically but emotionally too. Malabar Gold hosted a ground event, The Golden Truth, an initiative by the Times of India. Let's have a look at the special address by MP Ahmad, Chairman, Malabar Gold and Diamonds.
രാജ്യത്തിൻ്റെ സമ്പദ്ഘടന വികസിക്കുന്നത് കൂടുതൽ തൊഴിലവസരങ്ങൾ ഉണ്ടാകുമ്പോഴാണ്. ജനങ്ങളുടെ ജീവിത നിലവാരം ഉയരുന്നത് കൂടുതൽ ജനക്ഷേമകരമായ കാര്യങ്ങൾക്ക് സർക്കാരിന് പോകാൻ കഴിയണമെങ്കിലും സമ്പദ്ഘടന വികസിക്കണം. അതുകൊണ്ട് നമ്മുടെ സമ്പദ്ഘടനയുടെ 5 ട്രില്യൺ ആയി വികസിപ്പിക്കണമെന്ന് അവർ ഓണറബിൾ പ്രൈം മിനിസ്റ്റർ പ്രഖ്യാപിച്ചിട്ടുള്ളത്. എന്നാൽ 5 ട്രില്യണോടടുത്ത് ഇപ്പോൾ തന്നെ നമ്മുടെ എക്കണോമി ഉണ്ട്. നമ്മുടെ സമ്പദ്ഘടന ഉണ്ടെന്നാണ് എൻ്റെ അഭിപ്രായം. സമാന്തര സമ്പദ്ഘടനയെ നിയന്ത്രിച്ചാൽ വളരെ എളുപ്പം നമുക്ക് $5 ട്രില്യൺ എക്കണോമി ആവാൻ സാധിക്കും. ഇന്ത്യയുടെ ബിസിനസ് രംഗത്തെ സംഘടിത അസംഘടിത എന്ന നിലയിൽ വേർതിരിച്ചാൽ നമ്മുടെ ബിസിനസ്സിൻ്റെ 70% അസംഘടിതരാണ്. അസംഘടിത മേഖലയിലാണ് ഏറ്റവും അധികം കണക്കിൽപ്പെടാത്ത ബിസിനസ് നടക്കുന്നത്. നികുതി വിധേയമായി നിയമങ്ങൾ അനുസരിച്ച് ബിസിനസ് ചെയ്യുന്നവരെ സംബന്ധിച്ച് കണക്കിൽപ്പെടാത്ത ബിസിനസ് വലിയ വെല്ലുവിളിയാണ്. അനധികൃത ബിസിനസ് നിയന്ത്രിക്കാൻ സർക്കാരിന് സാധിച്ചാൽ പ്രധാനമന്ത്രി പ്രഖ്യാപിച്ച ലക്ഷ്യത്തിലേക്ക് നമുക്ക് വളരെ പെട്ടെന്ന് എത്തിച്ചേരാൻ സാധിക്കും. അനധികൃത ബിസിനസ് ഏറ്റവും അധികം നടക്കുന്നത് സ്വർണ്ണാഭരണ മേഖലയിലാണ്. എല്ലാവർക്കും അറിയാവുന്നൊരു വസ്തുതയാണ്. ഒരു വർഷം ശരാശരി 850 to 900 ടൺ സ്വർണം ഇറക്കുമതി ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ടെന്ന് ഔദ്യോഗിക കണക്കുകൾ. അതേസമയം നമ്മുടെ സ്വർണത്തിൻ്റെ ആവശ്യം അനൗപചാരിക കണക്കനുസരിച്ച് 4000 ടൺ മുതൽ 5000 ടൺ വരെയാണ് ഒരു വർഷം നമുക്ക് ആവശ്യമുള്ളത്. 1 കോടി മാരേജ് ഇന്ത്യയിൽ നടക്കുന്നു. 140 കോടി ജനസംഖ്യയിൽ 1 crore മാരേജ് ഏവറേജ് നടക്കുന്നു. ഏവറേജ് പർച്ചേസ് നോക്കിയാൽ 4000 to 5000 ടൺ ഗോൾഡ് വി ആർ യൂസിങ് ഇൻ ഇന്ത്യ. ഇതിനർത്ഥം നികുതി വിധേയമായി ഇറക്കുമതി ചെയ്യുന്ന സ്വർണത്തിൻ്റെ 4-5 ഇരട്ടി കള്ളക്കടത്തായി ഇന്ത്യയിൽ എത്തുന്നുവെന്നാണ്.
We also got in conversation with experts to discuss the impact of gold on the Indian economy.
So what we're trying to do is we're talking of the golden truth today. Let me try and put a larger picture before you. We're trying to get to a whole variety of colors. The yellow metal, red hot demand. You know, there are other colors to it as well. The black, which was referred to it briefly. We'll try and understand how it can contribute to the economy being in the pink of health. And we'll also try and understand, as you briefly referred to it, how it can change the way of working, the green part of it. Everyone wants that today, and you want a green tinge to everything. So we'll try and get to all these colors as we go along in the next few minutes. So first, Mr. Guruswamy, from you I'd like to understand, given the scale that we talk about and what it can do, how can a policy address the need for the government, the need for consumers because they need the right products, as well as the welfare and growth of the industry? So how do we balance the three? Sometimes it does look like tax rates are going a little higher, 15%, 12% plus 12.5 plus 2.5, plus some of the other issues seem to be tilted against the organized players right now. How can we change that as a country?
You asked me.
Yes.
Reminds me of a question I used to ask my mother. We used to have cows in our house, and every time we had to buy a new cow, I would ask her, what kind of cow do you want? And she'd say, I want one which doesn't eat too much and gives lots of milk. So that's the kind of policy you want, you know. And of course, you know, doesn't have too many droppings also in the backyard. But it's very difficult. You've got to balance it off. Give some, take some. And if you go to, but you know, clearly when the policy is not working, you've got 40% of your imports are what we estimate conservatively is black. I hate to use the word black. It's something which we didn't pay taxes on. That's all it means. comes in, that means it is not succeeding. And it's a habit you can't break easily. It's like pricing cigarettes. If you price it too high, then there'll be smuggling. Today I noticed when I was coming in here, there's an auto rickshaw carrying a sign saying 35 million sticks are smuggled into India every year because the taxes are high. So at some stage it becomes counterproductive. So I think we've come to a stage when this gold excise duty, import duty, has become counterproductive. And also the gold GST has become counterproductive. I think what we need to do is a cost-benefit analysis on how many people does it employ, gold making, how many people, what is the value addition, what is the export gain? Now, $12 billion worth of exports. It's not inconsiderable, it's a huge amount. And
Precisely why we need a smarter policy.
a smarter policy, but not a policy based on traditional likes and dislikes. You know, we don't like the idea of gold hoarding. It's gone into our minds. But gold is a fact of life. People love gold. And you've got to live with that fact.
Okay. Nirupama, if we are going to design something, as I use the word, which takes care of the interest of industry, government, insofar as taxes is concerned, and the consumer gets assured products, hallmarking and everything. How do we do that? And over the years, the way we've gone about it, there is a certain mess that has been created. How do we take care of that and change it for the future? Again, it's a little bit of a mouthful.
This is basically the question and the objective of, I think, every person who works in policy, in industry. This is the end objective. What you're talking about is literally the end objective. And I think it has to be broken down into components. I think the first component at the end of the day, of course, is consumer protection. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that what is sold is good products and the consumers are not cheated and that they get what their money is worth and it's good and there is a certain amount of trust. I think the entire idea behind hallmarking was this. So to some extent, I mean, obviously with any big reform, and hallmarking is a huge reform for the industry, and in terms of scale and size, not almost as much as your GST implementation, just because of the number of people who are there and the kind of scale and size it involves, the infrastructure, all of it. I think it's a great first step. Obviously, plenty of teething problems in terms of the infrastructure itself and all of that, but I think we will get there. From the industry point of view, I think regulators, statutory regulators and policymakers can only go so much in terms of making sure that we function normally, which is why self-regulation becomes important. We all self-regulate ourselves as citizens as well. We know what is good, we know what is not, and we make sure we self-regulate ourselves. The industry has to learn to self-regulate, and hopefully with that self-regulation, you will find that the market also, as consumers, we recognize that and go towards people who adopt better practices. And I think that's the way we can go. To expect the government alone to create that complete ecosystem will not happen. But where they can make a difference is, for example, in making sure that the policies are not counterproductive, which seems to have happened in a couple of places. And more importantly, as a government, you see, every policy is made with an objective, but as in India, and I think we don't have this habit of reviewing our policies. You would have a stated objective when you come out with any policy, and we don't have this habit of coming back to it and checking and saying, okay, this is why I did this now. Is it working? Is it not working? If it is not working, what is the course correction that needs to be done? This has to be business as usual. We don't do that. And I think for certain industries, especially like gold, this is something that should be done automatically. I think that's the role the government needs to play.
Mr. Guruswamy, you referred to that very briefly about the kind of asset that's lying unutilized. So when a government thinks about what kind of a gold scheme or a gold declaration scheme or how to monetize the asset that is in households, with institutions, with different bodies, your experience, Can you share in some detail? And where should we change from what has been in the past, the way governments have been thinking?
I think there is basically a distrust in government, at least even in general society, of people in the gold business. You know, there's as much trust in a jeweler as you have in a politician. But that's a fact of life. And so if you are seen as punishing them, then in perception, in many people in government, that is a good thing. But it doesn't work that way. Actually, you're punishing society as a whole. Higher taxes will encourage other kinds of economic activity. And that economic activity at some stage becomes very large. The only way to deal with this, since it's so easily done, gold smuggling is so easily done, it's not very difficult at all. I know. You only have to deal with it monetarily, fiscally.
Given what I heard from you, you used the word rationality. Policy making, when you're particularly adding the political twist to that, is that a practical solution?
It is practical. I'll tell you, a year there was a huge glut in the heavy vehicle industry in India. And vehicles were just in stockyards, in Tatas and Leylands and wherever. And if heavy vehicles don't move, heavy industry doesn't move. So government said, let's do something. And I looked at the policy and I said that we give them depreciation if you buy the vehicle in the first 6 months, first half of the year. If you buy the vehicle in the second half of the year, there is no depreciation allowance allowed. So I said, why don't we allow depreciation for the whole year? Because it's already the 6 years are over, let's give it. So the hue and cry in the Department of Taxation, saying that, how can we do this? We've never done it before. I said, never done it before, do it one-off time, because the vehicles are glutted up there, we want to get it out. Finally, the whole department was up in arms. Finally, the minister and the Prime Minister put their foot down and said, give it, just for this year. So let those vehicles move out. So, very difficult to appeal to rationality in government. And that is the kind of pressure which works, saying that you're being foolish by not doing it. And I think this is the right time of the year to do it.
Also, another point, Mr. Guruswamy, on India, make in India and the larger picture, how can India possibly be a manufacturing hub for gold jewelry and we really can make it big? What should be the vision for a government policy for that?
I don't really know what drives that market, but I know that $13 billion worth of jewelry exports take place from India every year, at least last year. And it's a sizable export. And which means that, I worry if government has to then organize a export zone park, then, the bureaucracy will step in and then they'll start dictating what has to be done. I think it's better to leave it in the hands of people like our sponsors today who established 290 stores abroad or whatever, and who are exporting. And obviously they're able to export because of good quality and trust they've built up. And that's what you need to do in this business. But don't have export duties and things like that. This is a value addition, let it go out, and it gets that gold out of the ground, gets it out, and puts it to use to work for our society. And that should be the main consideration. But that is obviously something which the government needs to study and talk to the industry, saying, what do you want on this? The point of interaction between government and the industry, if, the finance minister at this time of the year meets people from industry, but there's nobody from, say, the farming sector, the biggest sector in terms of employment. There's nobody from, say, the jewelry sector, which is big in terms of exports. So you have the same culprits from CII, FICCI, and, the same lot, who will advance the same interest every year. But you don't have sectoral interests coming in. So you need sectoral interests, people who are exporting furniture, which is a fairly big business. People who are exporting car parts, which is a fairly big business. You could need these sectors saying, what can we do for you? You need something in this country like MITI, which is the Ministry of Industrial Trade and Development in Japan, which actually goes to sectors and say, what can we do to make you export more? And that is how you understand. But ministry has become a regulatory body. From a regulatory body, it should become a promotion body.
Okay, good time, because the budget's coming up in just a few months, 1st of February, so perhaps the right time. Nirupama, moving on, talking a little bit about the financial products which are trying to monetize or get liquidity into the system using the interest in gold, using the propensity for people to buy gold, or how does that change and how does that help in adding to the liquidity, given the gold that we have, the gold that can be monetized?
So the gold monetization scheme in its earlier avatar was called the gold deposit scheme, has existed for quite a while. I don't think it ever worked for the gold deposit scheme, which is what it was earlier. It was only very few temples which had mostly your Tirupati temple and your Siddhivinayak who used to deposit their scheme for interest. So there were two products then called the gold deposit scheme, and there was also what is known as a gold metal loan. For those of you who don't know, it's a very interesting product where banks lend the metal out to jewelers. So it's not a money loan, it's literally the metal loan. So the idea was with the gold monetization scheme, or the revamped one, is you are able to get deposits from the public. So today, how does it work? If a jeweler wants gold, the gold is imported. But with the gold monetization scheme, the idea is that people, all of us, are able to deposit our gold with the bank, and then the bank will onward lend that to jewelers, and you create a nice cycle there, which keeps going, and after a few years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever the term, I get my gold back. It sounds fabulous, it sounds interesting, but inherent problems in terms of the process is a little cumbersome, it's not always easy. Also, the fact that at the end of the day, when I'm going with my jewelry will have to be melted, destroyed, so it's not like your gold loans where I can leave it there, monetize it, and get it back. This is one bit, but this was ideally how they wanted to bring the gold out, and you wanted to create a certain fungibility in terms of physical gold and financial gold. It really hasn't worked. We've been working with the government on how we can make it better. It's a little problematic. It's going to take a while, because not only is it a question of simplifying the procedures, it's also a question of battling, to some extent, sentiment and all of that from the domestic side. But you have other very interesting financial products. You see, that's where the investment gold goes, whether it's a sovereign gold bond or whether it is even your exchange traded funds, ETFs, and today your digital gold. But as I said, see, at the end of the day in India, we don't view gold as only either a consumption element or only as an investment element. For us, it is two rolled into one. When we buy gold, we buy saying that it is for me to use as a chain, but it is also great investment. Similarly, if I'm collecting gold in grams or through coins in whatever manner, it is because I say at a later point, if I want to convert it into jewelry, I can use this gold and I don't have to pay. It's almost like a systematic investment that you make in gold, which then, helps you build it up over the years, and then you're able to redeem it later. This fungibility is important, and in our current framework of how we are operating financial instruments in gold, we don't have this fungibility. There are certain players who do that at their level, but it has to be formal. So ETFs, investments in ETFs, you should be able to redeem it with jewelers, find a way to do that. Similarly, digital gold, you should be able to, trade it. So you literally use gold as a currency then. That's what you want to do. So the investments have to do that. How do you build liquidity into the market? I think liquidity will come when you have more people buying. The sovereign gold bond doesn't have liquidity because it's currently only for retail participants. Get your institutional investors into it. So for example, get your ETFs, get mutual funds, get pension funds to invest, because gold is an investment asset class. That will hopefully bring in more liquidity in the market if this were permitted.
Okay, last question to you, Mr. Guruswamy. In your time, while you were in government, was something like this ever thought of, where a government goes to an industry body and asks, what kind of problems are you facing? How can we address it? Does it happen today, if you're aware of?
That was a long time ago. I don't think it ever happened in government, because it's not the culture of government to find out what we can do to push these things. The culture of government is pretty colonial. That is how to regulate and control. And so we're still talking in terms of regulation and control rather than promotion. And which is why we get stuck with, I keep going to China often because I study their economy, and I'm amazed at the absence of regulation in China. Everything is done to export. Export has become a religion in China. And so much so that, you know, this company Oreva, which was in the news the other day, it used to be the world's biggest clockmaker in Morbi and in Saurashtra. World's biggest clockmaker. And the whole clockmaking business went off to Shanghai with Ajanta. He's got factories in Shanghai now. And they import the clocks, bring it here, and sell it in India as an Indian brand. All your ceiling fans, everything now come from China. Nothing gets manufactured here. So we have to wonder. I used to run an air conditioning compressor company, and today there are no compressors made in India. All the compressors, all the air conditioners get imported. And we are now buying 2 million air conditioners a year. At the time I was running the business, market was 100,000. So you are going to worry about how are we going to get these industries back here. And that is how you do it by promotion. You look at target gold, anything which uses hands, handlooms, because they are labor intensive, and see how you can promote them. How you will do it is, Prime Minister is talking of getting a lot of people from the private sector into positions, but very difficult for people making lateral entries into government to succeed. He's trying to break the stranglehold of a particular service by bringing forest officers into finance ministry, etc., etc. But let's see how he succeeds. But you got to get a mentality change that might be more difficult and take time.
So we began with the conversation around culture. Partha mentioned about culture, gold being a part of the culture, and we're back to the culture part that you're talking about. So very interesting. Thank you so much for taking out the time, and thank you everyone for being with us so patiently listening to the conversation.